I think some people talk about Ezekiel Elliott as if he's like the worst running back in football. Like, listen, I'm not going to sit here and say he's worth his contract or he's as good as he was his rookie year or anything like that, but he's still a good player. And so that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. And we're going to start off with this play where what's going to happen is pretty simple block. It's going to be to the left side of the screen. And in fact, I think this play can kind of both talk about what people dislike about Elliott and what people like about Elliott, both in the same play. So the dislike part, let's start with that first. The Cowboys have had a pretty good offensive line since Elliott has been there. That's been one of the luxuries, is Elliott got drafted into a good situation. There's no denying that. Watch, right when this play begins, you see how this is blocked very well. Elliott has a huge hole that he can run through, and this is something that's just been the case for his career. You compare him and like a division rival, Saquon Barkley, there's no denying that Elliott has been in a better situation. But I would also argue that, I think if you're watching this stuff with a trained eye, you don't just inherently give a running back credit because they got more yards. You look at it and say, okay, but what did you do on top of that? And I think Elliott does a great job at, working with this great offensive line to get as many yards as possible in the running game. Look, as you see, he does a great job at accelerating through and picking up a ton of yards on that play that I think an average running back would not have gotten. So I'm also not going to sit here and say that the Cowboys offensive line has never had problems in Elliott's career. It has, but, given some offensive line play, it's definitely been one of the better ones, since he's entered the league. But also on top of that, I would say that he fits that offensive line well. He can get through a gap quickly. He can do all the things that allow you to pick up as many yards as possible in those situations. I think something like this is a good example of what he can do, where it's going to be a running play, obviously. Although I should mention, I didn't talk about this at all, in any of these clips, but one of the best pass protecting halfbacks in the league as well. But that's, conversation for another day. Right here, what you're going to see is it's going to be the center is going to move up to block a linebacker. You have the edge rusher on the left side of the screen unblocked. And right when this play begins, again, well blocked by Dallas, but Elliott sees a perfect hole to run through. It's the one that I've highlighted on the screen. And look at what he does. Again, he just has that acceleration to get through and pick up a decent amount of yards on that play. So these are very good plays from Ezekiel Elliott. These are not necessarily highlight reel level plays. These aren't necessarily the Saquon Barkley juking out 17 people to gain 2 yards type of plays, but that's okay. These are getting more value. That's all I care about when I'm watching football is, or when I'm evaluating a player. How much value do you bring to your team? And he's bringing value there. We also have something like this, where what's going to happen here is it's going to be you have an extra offensive lineman in the game, lined up as kind of like a tight end fullback type position. Dallas does this sometimes. It's interesting, and, they like to do it. But anyways, right when this play begins, you see how there is definitely a window for Elliott to run through. So again, kind of similar situation. The offensive line did their job, but then look, Elliott takes advantage of that. And to be honest, I think I'd rather have a halfback like Elliott who, when the offensive line does their job, he's able to get as many yards as possible than one of those halfbacks who can make something happen out of nothing. Not to say that Elliott can't do that either, but to me, I care more about this aspect of football because, listen, if your offensive line sucks, you're not running the ball anyways. So what do you do when your offensive line is doing good? He does good stuff with it. And I think something like this is a great play. I've always felt like Elliott's vision doesn't get enough credit. Part of why he's always running through giant holes is because he's spotting the biggest hole. And this is kind of an example of him using his vision to help set things up. You have a linebacker, number 7 for Carolina, who's going to read this play well and try to run in quickly to be able to make a tackle for a loss. But as you see, when he does that, Elliott sidesteps him and ends up picking up a ton more yards than an average halfback would have. I think a lot of halfbacks would have gotten tackled for a loss right there, but they don't have the vision that Elliott does. So because of Elliott just being aware enough to notice that kind of thing, that's how he was able to pick up more yards. And, it's kind of similar to how a lot of people will say, with a quarterback, he was just throwing to wide open players. I know Mac Jones in college is a great example of this, where people would say, he's just throwing to wide open receivers. And while that's true, he had great receivers. A big part of how he was able to make it work was because he was also using his eyes and doing things to hit the open player. Well, it's true of halfbacks as well, and I think Elliott does have that. Finally, one last play, this one. Elliott does have home run hitting ability as well. That's the last thing about Elliott, is that he can definitely, he I think definitely has a high batting average, but he can swing for the fences as well, and this is an example. Like, watch, as you see, so it's well blocked, and he picks the right lane. We've already established that he can do that stuff, gets to the next level. But The difference between a 10-yard gain and a 50-yard touchdown often is in, can you get a safety to miss on you, which can sometimes just be a safety making a mistake. But here it's really just going to be Elliott's speed, I think, where he's able to just blow by them. So he isn't quite able to get into the end zone, but he gets a big gain, and he's able to break that big gain because of what he did at the second level, and also because of what he did before he even got past the line of scrimmage, picking the right running lane. All of that good stuff worked together to allow Elliott to be able to pick up so many yards. And to me, this is what I see Elliott, when I watch film of him, see him do consistently, is just doing the little things well. And listen, he's an older running back. We get it, all that stuff. But he's still playing well, in my opinion. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel about Ezekiel Elliott. Is like, listen, that contract, it's just, I never understood why they gave so much guaranteed money for such a lengthy contract for a running back. I think you can make an argument paying a running back makes some sense if you really like that running back, if they're very good. I still wouldn't do it, but I can understand the argument. Because the reality is, it's fair to say Ezekiel Elliott is not that superstar running back we saw right when he entered the league. He has not been quite as good. I think you can make an argument Tony Pollard has played better than Ezekiel Elliott, which is not necessarily a bad thing. That doesn't mean that Elliott is a bad running back. I think Elliott can be good, and everything I just said can be good. I think sometimes people sort of act like it's either Elliott is great or Elliott sucks, when it's like, no, he's still a good running back who is not living up to his contract, which anyone would have told you when that contract was signed. There's a very small chance it's going to age well. It'll be good in the short term and a little bit tough in the longer term. That's not Elliott's fault. That's just a running back situation. So, yeah, again, like I said, I think Elliott is he's a good running back. How good is he? That remains to be seen. But he's a starting running back in the NFL, certainly. And I'd say maybe like a top 20 running back in the NFL, in my opinion. He's just not one of those elite guys. He's not Derrick Henry, right? I don't think anyone's going to say that. And I don't think anyone's going to say that he's what he was as a, first-year player. But it's kind of one of those things where what was he supposed to do? Turn down the big contract that he was offered? No, of course not. Take the money that is, that you have been offered. That just obviously makes sense. Again, you can't go back in time and, not pay Elliott that money. You could try to trade him if you want to. I'm not sure if anyone wants to take that contract on. Maybe you could trade him, make a sort of like a hockey or a basketball trade and add a sweetener or something if you wanted to. I don't know. But, you could make that argument because I think it is fair to say that money probably could be used in ways to help your team more than Ezekiel Elliott at this point in his career. But that doesn't mean that he is a bad halfback either. Both things can be true. If you watch like basketball or hockey, you see it all the time where like in hockey, there's a good player who is still a negative asset because they're getting paid way too much. That's kind of how I view Elliott. So those are my thoughts on this situation. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.